heard something. What could have done this?
What the hell?
How are you doing today, Courtney?
I'm good. How about you, Grant?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. I'm really excited to chat about Consumed. I watched it earlier this morning and it just was such a gripping feature from start to finish. You're obviously no stranger to the horror genre, but what was it about this project that really sparked your interest to be a part of it?
For me, this one, it really came down to the script for it. And I was given, in the same way that most actors are for a project like this, you're given such a small amount. I think I had maybe 5 or 6 pages of the script to start without knowing too much about what Beth was going to go through. I was able to read 5 and 6 pages, and I just so desperately wanted to be a part of this. It's a character that's obviously suffered an intense amount of grief, personal grief. And you really, I felt that from the initial audition, and I wanted to find a way to bring her to life. You add to that, obviously, a creature in the woods and all of these other elements. It makes it much more fun. But for me, it was always about this character's struggle of finding her way back to herself.
So before I dive in then to the horror elements, I would love to hear what were the pages of this, what part of the film were you given to audition for?
Yeah, I always love seeing that. I mean, I'm the type of person where I love to watch people's auditions too, to see like, what was it? And that's probably the actor in me being like, what did they do? Like, how did they? But yeah, what I was given for this character was actually just the scene of Beth and her husband, Jay, when they're first gathered around the fireplace. And without giving too much away, Jay brings the medical bracelet, and it's sort of their conflict there. And I think it goes on for, it's on the page. I think it was a 6 or 7 page scene of just the two of them really confronting something that they haven't talked about before, about what this illness has done to both of them, and sort of how much tension there still is between them in their marriage. So that's all that I had to go off of. I knew it was going to go beyond that, but I really didn't know where it was going beyond that. I just knew that there was going to be, if this is where it's starting, because it's very early on in the script, I knew that it was going to only get more intense from there.
I love that scene in particular. It really is not only a well-acted scene between you two, but also just a great sort of exploration of what a sickness can do to two different parties. And so going off of there, you mentioned how it was really important for you to bring Beth to life. And I'd love to hear what were some of the keys that you found, whether they were in the script or from your own sort of vision for her in order to bring her to life.
Right. I mean, I think there's a real sense with her that she has been to the absolute bottom of how depressed and filled with grief you can. She's already been through that before we even meet her. We know that she's fought her way back from, essentially dying. She came very close, and she's someone who has already fought her way back once. And I think she's aware from the very beginning. We know that she's aware that she's going to have to fight again. We don't know what that's going to be, but it does end up being, obviously a much more physical fight than I think the previous time. So for me, I really wanted to make sure that there was a strength to her. I didn't want her to feel like a shrinking violet or just like a damsel in distress, because she really does need to carry a lot of the story. So for me, I wanted there to be that strength, obviously still tempered with someone who's still suffering actively, and who's still just working through a lot of grief.
Well, I think you captured those layers very well, and I do love that we get to see such a powerful female character in a story like this, in comparison to like you say, the damsel in distress. And so what was it then like developing the rapport with the actor that played Jay? His name escapes me at this moment, but finding that dynamic of there is care and love for one another, but there is also that tension from what you went through before.
Yeah, so that's Mark and I worked together initially in the film. We actually, I think some of our first scenes together were the first scenes from the film. So we were really building it from scratch, still trying to find a way to make this look like a real marriage, but two people that are almost in some ways living in their own opposite worlds. He really isn't understanding that she's still actively suffering, and she's not understanding necessarily that he went through it too, that it's not, when a couple goes through a serious illness like this, it does take its toll on all parties. There's no separating that from the marriage. And I think in a lot of ways, Mark's character of Jay is trying to just move on. Let's move on. Let's get past this. And it's something where Beth really can't. She's really still stuck in it for a lot of reasons. So Mark and I working together, this was our first time working together. I think because it is such a limited cast, we really were able to get to know each other well and to really bring their relationship to life. That it's not this perfect marriage. It's really definitely two people that are struggling, that used to probably have a lot of life and joy in them, and it's just been beaten out of them.
So actors obviously have a lot of different ways in connecting with their co-stars and finding that dynamic. What would you say was the key for you both in finding that and you know, building that rapport with one another?
Yeah, I mean, I think simply from the long days that we had together. So because this was being filmed during COVID, we were pretty isolated. So it's a case of, you know, you really can't go out. You needed to be very safe about not being exposed at all, and just being safe with a very intimate cast like this. So I think we got to spend a lot more time together than I'm used to. There's a lot of cases where you just start rolling on day one and it's a, hi, nice to meet you, let's go. I think we had about like a week and a half of rehearsal prior, where it was just the two of us really getting to work alongside Mitch, our director, and then Phil, so who make up the Butcher Brothers. So we really got a little bit more time together than I expected. He came into it similarly. I think his audition scene would have been the same as mine. And it was something where like we both were immediately like drawn in, and that was the scene that we were both so excited to shoot together. I think that was one of our first scenes together, and I'm really glad we got to do that one.
Well, it sounds like a very rewarding collaborative experience. So I'm glad that you got to have that. And I'd also love to talk about Devon in the film as well. I mean, he's obviously another horror veteran, and his character has a very tenuous relationship with Beth. He has a lot of secrets. But at the same time, he sort of lets those vulnerabilities show here and there. What was it like, you know, getting to work with Devon, finding that dynamic with him, with his character and Beth?
Yeah, I mean, he's a brilliant actor. I think everyone knows that. It's just amazing to get to see like the breadth of his career and the variety that he's done. I mean, he's obviously been killing the game since he was a kid. I know that he's just such a horror buff, and he's been obviously like so immersed in this world for so long. So the second that I read the script and the second that I found out that he was on board, it was like, absolutely, I could not picture anyone else from that point on. He is an immensely talented actor. I think the two of us decided fairly early on that we were willing to take the characters as far as we could, sort of beyond the page. So there's a lot of scenes where we are quite physical with each other. And, you know, obviously under the supervision of our stunts team, that was both of us just saying, like, let us do this. Like, we trust each other. Let's take this as far as it can go. And let's really make it feel like it's two animals circling each other the whole time, just trying to figure the other one out.
I hadn't even thought of that sort of analogy before. And I love that you found that with Devon, because it really does create this sort of additional tension to the other big tension, which I will come to next, is the when to go. I mean, it is, I don't see that entity explored enough in the horror genre. And so I'd love to hear sort of what your thoughts are on, you know, did you do research into this kind of creature, or did you sort of go with what the Butcher Brothers had in mind and envisioned for the film?
For me, I went more with what was on the page. And so what our writer, Dave Calvert, had written. I didn't want to go too far into it. I think mostly because I think there's a bit of an element of surprise. Even when we finally do see the creature, when Beth finally is faced with the creature, I wanted there to be still some element of unknown, because she really doesn't know what it is that she's dealing with. She's just trying to get her husband and her out of this situation. So I did kind of want to go into it a little bit more blind in that sense. That said, as soon as every sketch was coming out, or every little bit of the creature that I could see as it was starting to take shape, I was like, oh, what's that? Like, what's it going to be? What's it going to look like? How's it going to move? Like, all of those things. I think just because I've been, in this industry since I was a kid, some of those practical effects, getting to see those brought to life is kind of rare.
I feel like practical effects are still the best way to go for horror films, and I'm glad that they did it with this, because that design is one that's going to stick with me a lot longer than a CGI design would have. So yeah. There's something, it's so much more fun to play opposite too. I mean, it's like you're really, I mean, I've obviously done my fair share of acting opposite, like a tennis ball on a stick. But when you're actually faced with something like this, it's not only the horror of it, but it's also the artistry that goes into it, all of the sculpting and design and the character within the
the creature. So I love practical effects. I'm glad you feel the same.
Yeah, they're just the absolute best. And so I did actually want to touch on something that you've mentioned prior, but also comes up with the Wendigo, is the physicality of this movie. I mean, you are hiking, this is a survival thriller as much as this is a horror movie involving a creature. What was it like, embracing the physicality as you're also really trying to, convey the emotions that Beth is going throughout this film?
Right. I mean, it is a very physical role. I think so much of it was easily lent to me just by the environment. We're really out in the woods. I mean, when you're watching this, there's no parking lot right there. I mean, we're really either hiking in or, some days being driven in a little buggy. So anytime we were out there, you're really just in it. There's nowhere to go, and you really just have to commit to it. There's so many times where, like you said, I'm running, I'm dodging, I'm jumping over things. A lot of that is thanks to having an incredible stunt coordinator, because I think otherwise I would have tripped on day one, which I think I did on day two. Something about being able to physically give myself to the character, I think, made it easier to just feel like I was inhabiting her. At that point, I had been, stuck indoors for however long we had been, and I think I was just dying to get into the woods anyway. So I was happy to be running around for this one.
I can only imagine. I mean, I was right there with you, and I was in LA at the time, so it was like, oh God, get me out of here.
Oh yeah. The second somebody was like, would you like to go run through the woods for your, running for your life? I'm like, sounds great. I would love to go outside. Let's go.
So what was your favorite scene then that involved that level of physicality to get to perform? I mean, you have a few fights with the Wendigo. You have, as you mentioned, one with Devon. You have, I want to avoid spoilers. You have a lot. Yeah. So what would you say was one of your favorites to get to perform?
There's a struggle with Devon and myself where we're fighting over something. I, again, don't want to give anything away. And that was one that actually was not in the script. I think as it was written on the page, it was maybe 2 lines of someone grabs something and then the other person just gives up. And both Devon and I, and mostly Devon, I think, led this. He was like, what if there's an actual struggle here? Like, you've been pushed and pushed and pushed at this point. Wouldn't there be a bit of a fight back? And I'm like, absolutely, let's do this. And so that was just sort of us being able to really unleash, like I said, these 2 animals that are circling each other. That was, to me, that's the 2, foxes or wolves or whatever, just going at each other. That said, again, stunt team is right there watching it and making sure we're not doing anything too unsafe. But yeah, he's a very giving actor in that he was really willing to go there physically, and I was right there with him. So I think that's definitely one of my favorites from the film, and I hope it plays as well.
I think it really does, and I mean, like you said, it's not only a sort of relief for her of after being pushed for so long, but also, like you said before, really shows how strong she is in this situation and willing to fight for herself. So I love that. I see I'm almost out of time, so before I let you go, I'm also still a big fan of the original Unfriended, and it's both surreal to me to be talking to you through Zoom with that in mind, but also surreal to think that it's been almost a decade now since that film came out. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts, reflecting on that time and where you are now in your career, and sort of, if fans still come up to you and want to ask you a million questions about that movie.
Yeah, I think that movie is such a brilliant, it was such a new concept, and it's also such a time capsule if you watch it again. I mean, it really, 10 years ago does feel like 10 years ago when you're watching it, much less from the fact that the iPhones we're holding are tiny little, whatever generation iPhones we had. I think that film really struck a chord with a lot of people, not only because of the way that it's presented. It's obviously presented just as you and I are on a computer screen like this, but also because that film was shot in a really unique way where a lot of it was run like a play. We would do takes of the entire film almost all the way to the end. So we would do about a 2-hour take. And we were actually physically in a house together. That wasn't a soundstage, that was someone's house. So if you watch the film, everyone's in a different bedroom or room. They ran out of rooms by the time they got to me. So they're like, she's in the laundry room. We don't know why, but she's in the laundry room. It's the only room left. So yeah, we really did get to improvise quite a bit on that one, and to really shoot it like a play. I think we, at the end of it, all the way through, had run the film like a play over 20 times, maybe 30 times. It was really a unique experience as an actor, and I think that comes across in the film. I think it's the way that teenagers talk, it's the way they talk over each other, it's the dynamic that they have that feels, you know, like a time capsule, but in some ways very timeless too.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. There's still a lot in that film, whether it be the tech or just the conversations between each other, that 10 years later I still go, yeah, that feels right. That feels like it's still happening today. So
Yeah.
I think y'all captured it well. And I think, again, Consumed is also just such a great thrill ride from start to finish with some amazing characters. So I can't wait to spread the word. Thank you, Courtney, so much for taking the time. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Grant. I appreciate it too.
What is that thing?
When to go.
What the hell is it when to go?